Hello again everyone, Kurt here, and we're going to do another video. Today's video is on course design. Now this is part one of a two-part video set, I guess you would call it. And the second one is going to be on lesson planning. So today's topic is more broad and it's more at a macro level, as if you are going to design an entire program or an entire course over a long period of time. So what are the steps involved in doing that? And then in the next video, next week's class, we're going to look specifically at an individual class, creating a lesson plan based on one part of the course design. Okay, so here we go. This is what we're going to be looking at today. First of all, just a couple definitions, and then we're going to look at a flowchart. And this flowchart basically shows the different steps in designing a course. Now, all of those below, situation needs analyses, problematizing, and so on, those are all sections in the flowchart. So this flowchart is going to show us the order, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about each step. So two definitions before we start. The first one is curriculum. This is the selection and structure of the goals, content, sequence, procedures, and assessment of an entire course. And program, which is a collection of classes offered at one institution. Okay, so we will differentiate between these two. All right, so let's have a look. Oh, I'm sorry, we got two more. The next one is syllabus. So the planned structure of a single course in a program, and it outlines specific course goals, requirements, readings, assessments, and scheduled assignments, and then course. So this is a time-limited experience with regular meetings with a limited number of students. Okay, and if you have any questions about the difference between them, we can discuss these in class. All right, so now I want to move on to the flowchart. So this is basically the order that we would design a program or a course for any subject. But of course, for us, we're talking about our English classes. So you can see up at the very top, I'm going to talk about each one in more detail after, but just to quickly go through the order here. So you can see at the very top, as a program designer, the very first thing you should be doing is identifying the situation, the context, and who are the students. And when you get to this part, now you need to account for the program priorities. So what is it that the school or the government wants to get from the program? And you need to analyze needs. Now, needs should be at the forefront. It should be the students. What are their needs? But of course, you need to consider the school, and you also need to consider yourself as well. So once this is all figured out, now you have to specify your goals. And your goals should be for the entire course or the entire program. What are the students going to be able to do? What should they learn by the time they're done this course? Okay, so once you've determined your goals, now the next step is to determine your course content, the sequences, the structure, all of these things. And then you move on to your course units, assignments, schedules, and assessments. And this is where you create your syllabus. So you can see if you're designing a course for the very first time, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is the textbook. So when you sit down, and I strongly recommend that you do this, you need to go through these steps, especially the very first year that you're teaching, because you cannot just take a textbook and walk into the class and say, okay, so today I need to do 2 pages. It's too short-sighted this way. You're not looking at the big picture. You need to ask yourself, what are my goals? What do I need to do for the students? Who are my students? How can I best serve them? And after you make these plans, you determine all of your order and your structure so that you can meet the goals and meet their needs. Okay, so you can see lesson plans come way down here. Now, off to the side, I have available materials and resources. So typically, when you're talking about choosing a textbook or other materials, I wouldn't say it needs to go in here or here or here or here, but choosing your materials. Now, maybe you don't have a choice, but the selection of materials, if you do have a choice, it should definitely come after you specify your goals, because the materials need to match your goals. They need to be able to match the course content, and they should suit the sequences and structure of your course. And of course, afterwards, you will refer to your materials as you design your lessons and units and things like that. Okay, so down below, and also, sorry, one last thing, when you have your textbook, whatever's missing, so see, you've already designed what you want, what's the content, and you know what the units are, you've thought about this. Then you go back to the textbook and say, okay, what's missing? So I'll need to create or add extra materials on top of that. Okay, so of course, once you have constructed your lesson plans and you teach, and then you assess. You're assessing the students. How well did they do? Did they learn as well as you wanted them to? Did they meet their goals? And of course, you are assessing yourself. Or if you are an administrator, you're assessing the teachers. How well did they meet the students' needs? How well did the program run? And then you go down and revise the course. And you will probably revise your course every single year that you teach, because you should always be assessing whether or not you were successful. And every year you should be making small changes, but changes that can benefit the students. Okay, so let me jump into each one. So I'm referring now, you see situation analysis. So what I'm doing is I'm going through the first box. I'm going to go through some of these now. Okay, so situation analysis comes first. So some things that you should be looking at are the educational setting, the class characteristics, the faculty characteristics. So if you are an administrator and your job is to help develop curriculum or set goals, you need to think about who your teachers are, how much experience they have, what type of teachers they are. You need to consider the governance of course content. So who actually determines the content? Are they following the curriculum guidelines set by the Ministry of Education? Are they just using the textbook? What's going on here? And then you need to also analyze assessment and evaluation requirements. So like junior high school students, you know at the very end of junior high school, they're going to have a major evaluation so that they can choose their high school. And so this all needs to be factored in. Okay, so the needs analysis, as I mentioned, it takes place before determining the goals. How can you create goals if you don't know what the students need first, right? And there are two types of needs that we can look at, subjective and objective. So first of all, we look at the objective needs. These can be measured. They can be analyzed through questionnaires, test data, teacher reports, observations, interviews with teachers and students. And the kind of information that we will typically gather is demographic data. So what type of students do we have? Needs based on proficiency level. So especially for English class, right? We need to think about that. The language skills to be addressed. As we know, speaking is a skill that often gets pushed to the side in the classroom. But what do the students need? In today's curriculum guidelines, we say that communication is very important. And so that needs to be part of the needs analysis. And what learners need to do in English. So as we said, we want students to be able to use English outside of the classroom. So these are actual objective needs. Now, what do they need to do outside of the classroom? Maybe that's a little bit more subjective, but that's something that you need to consider. Okay, so through subjective needs, a couple things here. These are needs through the learner's eyes. So what do they think they need? However, it's not always what they really need, and you have to be careful. Sometimes students think they need something that they don't really need. So you are the expert. You need to help them figure this out. And again, you can collect this type of data through the same methods that I talked about before. So what are you collecting? Well, their attitudes toward language and culture, their expectations, their perceived purpose for learning English, the specific skills they want to practice or improve, and their preferred learning styles or strategies. So when I said they might not always know what they really need, some students may tell you, I don't really need to practice my speaking, it's my grammar that's bad. But that's not really true. They should be practicing all skills. But anyways, you should at least try to figure out what it is that they think they need. And this is something that you can do in the very first day of your class. Ask them why they like English. Why do they want to learn English? What are their goals for the future? Of course, depending on the age of your students. Okay, the next stage in the course design is problematizing. So what you should be doing at the very beginning of designing a course is trying to anticipate what problems could show up. So here are a list of questions that you should be asking. Now, if you're designing your own course, you're the teacher. You're not an administrator. You're not designing for many teachers. Then some of these questions you don't need to worry about as much. But you know, one day you could become a course director, like academic affairs director, or perhaps you go on to work in a university. So first question, what are the requirements and conditions that impact the course? What type of support do you need? Like, can you get your budget approved, space, staff, etc.? What contradictions between what students want and need and what the schools will tell you they need? How about the budget? Are there any qualifications or availability issues? Are there any conflicting expectations between administrators and teachers? Now, this is one that you'll probably learn over years that there may be. And what are the requirements for assessment? So it's very important to think about this at the beginning. You know, if you're a junior high school or high school teacher, you know that assessment is very important, as I mentioned, at the very end, going into high school or college. But does that contradict your own personal beliefs on how to evaluate students? Like personally for me, it does, because I believe in a more communicative-based assessment, performance-based assessment that doesn't totally match what the students will do for their entrance exams. And so I need to be very careful that I don't let the students feel like I'm not preparing them. So I know that this is a problem, and that means I need to deal with it at the very beginning. Maybe I need to educate the students a little bit to show them that actually by learning how to use the language, it will improve your abilities on tests. You know, I need to do things like that. Okay, next stage then is to specify goals. So your goals are aims and purposes. They're directed towards the entire program. And objectives are more specific than goals. These are usually aims and purposes for a lesson or activity. Now, when we get to lesson planning, we're going to spend a lot of time on objectives. But overall, they should be, when you're defining your goals, they need to be measurable. So at the end of the course, you should be able to evaluate, did the students really meet the goals? And we'll talk about this later on. Okay. The next one is to create your course syllabus then. So here, as I mentioned, available materials should be consulted before you create your syllabus. Of course, if you're going to make your units based on the textbook chapters, then of course you need to have the book and you need to look at them back and forth. However, this is really important. Your textbook should never be the syllabus, and a lot of teachers will do this. They will just look at, okay, my textbook is 80 pages long or however many pages. How many days of class do I have? Cut it, okay, so that means 2 pages per class, and then all of your planning is done like that. This is totally the wrong way to do it. You need to make your plan first and then go to the materials and see how they work together. Okay, so in a communicative syllabus, there are 8 points to keep in mind. First of all, you should have the goals for the course. And then number 2, you should have your suggested objectives. It's a lot of tongue twisters today. Suggested objectives for units and lessons. So each unit and lesson through your entire semester or your entire year-long course, you should think about what your objectives are going to be. And again, we'll talk about objectives next time, but they should be measurable. Okay, and then number 3, you should have a sequential list of functions organized into weeks or days. So what is it that the students are actually going to do with the language? And they should come directly from the goals. So what are my goals? And then what are the functions students are going to do so that they can meet those goals? Then you should have a list of topics and situations that are matched to the functions. You should have a list of grammar, lexical, phonological forms, and so on, and they should match the functions as well. You should have a sequential list of skills that you want the students to practice, improve upon, and again, they should match the functions. You should have matched references and additional resources, and possible assessment alternatives and genres to be assessed. So it shouldn't just be midterm unit tests, but maybe you should add some alternative assessment. Again, something we'll talk about in later classes. Okay, now in terms of selecting materials, remember, always keep the goals in mind when you select your materials. They have to be done in combination with the syllabus. Remember, you should make your plan first before you choose your material. Try to find materials that actually match what you want. Now, there are some criteria to keep in mind. So as I mentioned, they correspond to the overall goals, they correspond to learner needs, and the course objectives. And it could be tricky if your school just says, here's your textbook, then you have some manipulation to do, but you'll have to also add your own materials as well. And as a new teacher, it's a lot of work, but if you do it properly, you'll have those materials for the next year and the year after that, so you can continue to use them afterwards. Always reflect on purposes of the course for learners to use language. Remember that. Your purpose is to teach them how to use English. The material should correspond to the methodological philosophy. So make sure it matches how you're going to teach the course. It should appeal to students. It shouldn't be too boring, and it shouldn't have topics that they don't like. It will be hard to motivate them that way. Make sure there's a very good teacher's edition with all the answers inside and extra materials, especially today with the online resources. Make sure that those are all there and they work well and you like it. You don't feel like it's too troublesome. Okay, next part is assessment. So remember, when you get to the assessment stage, you are assessing the student's performance to evaluate the course. Now, a lot of teachers like to blame the students when they don't do well, but typically if most students don't do well, that's not the student's problem. That's usually the teacher or the course or the material. There's something wrong. So you have to look in the mirror at your own self, your own teaching. Did you meet the school's needs and wants? Did you meet your students' needs and wants? Did you follow your own goals? So if you don't do the needs analysis, you don't set your own goals, at the end of the year, how can you evaluate how successful you were? You can't just look at your students' test scores. That's not a very good evaluation. You have to think about, okay, I had these particular goals. Can my students actually do that at the end of the course? And if not, why not? What happened? Okay, and then the very last one is course revision. So as I mentioned before, once it's all done, you need to have some type of reflection. And as a new teacher, it might be a good idea to keep an actual teaching journal after every single class. Just sit down for 2 minutes and write down some notes. And then at least you have an idea of how things went throughout the year. So when the course is over, see a need for change. Always trying to be updating your lesson, your course, whatever you're doing. But how much do you need to change it? That's the question. And make sure you have realistic goals for change. Don't make yourself promises that you can't keep. Oh, my class is so boring, so I'm gonna add singing and dancing and all of these things, but actually you don't like to sing and dance. You're just creating a situation that you won't be able to succeed in. So follow your own principles. Whatever type of teacher you are, go with it and use your strengths as a teacher to better assist your students. Okay, so that's it for course design, just kind of a short one today. And then as I mentioned, next time we'll get into lesson planning. All right, take care, everybody, and